Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So we're seeing more and more of the effects of the Supreme Court ruling. The sporting bodies can't hide behind trans women are women anymore because the Supreme Court has said that a piece of paper doesn't turn a man into a woman. And when it comes to the Equality Act 2010, that was specifically referring to women who are defined as women biologically, as being female. Very simple. So these sporting bodies can no longer allow women's sports to be infringed upon. They can no longer allow women's spaces to be infringed upon by men waving around a piece of paper. And if they were to do such a thing, if they were to continue to allow it, they could find themselves getting in trouble legally. They could find themselves getting sued, getting into hot water, because they've allowed women to be discriminated against on the basis of sex. So we're seeing a lot of them now turn around and backtrack. Suddenly they acknowledge what a woman is. Now they have no justification for allowing men to compete in women's categories. They didn't care about women getting injured though, did they? They didn't care about the risk to women's safety. They didn't care about fairness. But clearly they care about getting into trouble with the law. So the latest sporting body to backtrack on everything they've allowed to go on for the longest time is the FA. The Football Association released a statement citing the recent Supreme Court ruling. And this is what they had to say. An FA update following the recent Supreme Court transgender ruling. Our current policy, which allows transgender women to participate in the women's game, was based on this principle and supported by expert legal advice. This is a complex subject, and our position has always been that if there was a material change in law, science, or the operation of the policy in grassroots football, then we would review it and change it if necessary. The Supreme Court's ruling on the 16th of April means that we will be changing our policy. Transgender women will no longer be able to play in women's football in England, and this policy will be implemented from the 1st of June 2025. We understand that this will be difficult for people who simply want to play the game they love in the gender by which they identify. And we are contacting the registered transgender women currently playing to explain the changes and how they can continue to stay involved in the game. Also, it is possible for these transgender individuals to continue to stay involved in the game. It is possible. Because we were told that if they weren't able to play in the women's category, then they weren't able to play at all, that we were excluding them from sports. But suddenly, there's a way for them to continue being involved in the game. Interesting. And to say that if there was a change in science, the science has been clear from day one, which is exactly why there are categories in sports to begin with. The science has made it clear that men retain the advantages over women, even when they're on medications. So that is some nonsense. And of course, all they care about is avoiding legal liability. That's what it comes down to, which is why it's so important that the courts do the right thing. And in this case, they did. But what's funny is that this isn't a change in law. This is an acknowledgement of the existing law. But for the longest time, they were allowed to ignore it and gaslight us and tell us that a piece of paper makes it fair for a man to compete against women in sports. They ignored the injuries, including a broken knee. They ignored the disparities when it comes to teams with transgender players against teams that are all women, and the clear advantages that these male athletes have over the females. They ignored all of that and told us that it's perfectly fair and that we just have to deal with it. So now that the Supreme Court has acknowledged the truth, that it's actually discriminating against women on the basis of sex, to tell them that they have to compete against male athletes in a women's category, to tell them that they don't have their own locker rooms, that they have to be willing to undress in front of men. Finally, they're able to acknowledge that it's discrimination. When there were no repercussions for discriminating against women, they went along with it and they were happy to do it. But now that they can face serious repercussions, suddenly they know what a woman is. In the UK, there were 50 transgender players playing in women's leagues. That is a significant number. That impacts the female athletes, the female footballers. I'm happy to hear this news, but I'm also very annoyed because they're acting as if they didn't know what they were doing was discrimination all along. They're acting as if they didn't know that these people were not women, but yet they were allowed to compete in women's football. So transgender women are to be banned from playing women's football, cricket and netball in England following the Supreme Court ruling on single-sex spaces. Again, women of the UK, you have won. It's over, as far as I'm concerned. In a move welcomed by the Prime Minister.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right.
Oh, so even the Prime Minister is welcoming this sort of thing now, really? The Football Association confirmed it was stopping those born male from playing in the women's game. England Netball did the same, while Telegraph Sport has been told the England and Wales Cricket Board will formally follow suit on Friday. The news emerged barely a fortnight after the verdict of the UK's highest court and 3 weeks after the FA quietly brought in new trans rules that stopped short of a blanket ban. Both the FA and the ECB has been taking legal advice over a decision which this week led to trans women being prevented from playing competitive football in Scotland. A Downing Street spokesman said, "Obviously it's one for the FA, but we have been clear that biology matters when it comes down to women's sport, that everyone should be compliant with the law. And we will continue to ensure women and girls across the country can enjoy sports, and we will continue to support bodies to protect the integrity, fairness and safety of the game." So Lord Tresman, former FA chairman, told the Telegraph Sport, "The FA has finally seen sense. It would have been the utmost foolishness to disregard the Supreme Court. I welcome the change of heart. Today the FA should take several more decisions which demonstrate they understand the position they have placed our national sport in." He said first they should write and apologise to all those, perhaps especially the neurodivergent younger women who raised proper questions and were subjected to hearings, expunging the findings and cleaning the records. And there must surely be consequences for the most senior FA officers. No one can have such a shallow regard for the integrity of the sport. This is truly a matter for resignation and apology. Absolutely. Don't act like you're all willing to do the right thing suddenly, because when you knew very well that you were forcing women to compete against men in order to participate in sports, you were happy with that. You were happy to go along with that under the guise of trans women are women, or whatever justification they came up with.
As a trans female footballer, Natalie Washington now only has a month left being allowed to play in women's football in England.
The FA has been quite steadfast in their support for the participation of trans women up to now, so I was shocked, and I was clearly upset and disappointed that this means that I'm having to stop playing football.
Do you understand those who say there are sporting fairness and safety issues having trans women playing women's football?
Safety, I've personally not ever seen any evidence that there's any real safety risk in women's football. I get bashed about on the pitch as much as anyone else does, and I think it doesn't, and I think the FA have actually been reasonably clear that it doesn't seem that that's driving any of this decision. It is purely one of fear of litigation and the change in the law.
A Supreme Court ruling that a female is defined by biological sex, forcing change from the English and Scottish FAs.
It's wonderful news, but it's really quite late. The FA did not have to wait for the Supreme Court ruling. It was always open to it under the Equality Act to exclude people born male, people who are male, people who have male advantage from the female category, because the female category exists in order to exclude those people.
And Fiona McKenna of Sex Matters, she said, "This is welcome, but long overdue. The FA has had ample evidence of the harms to women and girls caused by its nonsensical policy of letting men who identify as women play in women's teams. The requirement to lower their testosterone tells you that everyone knew they were not women." Thankfully, the UK Supreme Court has now confirmed this, saying it is lawful to exclude all men, including trans women, regardless of their gender recognition certificate status. Every other sporting body now needs to re-establish a genuine women's category, and this shameful period in history will finally be brought to an end. Very, very well said there. Makes me think that there needs to be repercussions. In the very least, they need to restore to these women what was taken from them, in as much as it is possible to do so. And we know that the Ultimate Pool Group have now banned transgender pool players from competing in the women's category. Other sports such as rugby, athletics, swimming and cycling had long since banned trans women from their female categories. So what it all comes down to is the Supreme Court ruling means that these sporting bodies can now face legal action from women. It has opened the door to football and cricket authorities facing eventual lawsuits from female athletes. They could now face legal action from trans women, with the English Black Ball Pool Federation having already been taken to court for banning them from its female competitions. A verdict in that lawsuit is pending. They can try, but the lawsuits that are more likely to be successful now are lawsuits from women. And these sporting bodies know that all very well. That's why we're going to see more and more of them change their policies and get them to suddenly acknowledge what we've been saying this whole time. A piece of paper doesn't turn a man into a woman, and that forcing women to play against men is discrimination. And it's an injustice that has gone on for far too long. So let me know what you think. That's great news. Very long overdue, but we got there eventually. So thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.